Have you ever asked whether marriage is something God plans for you, or something you build through the choices you repeat every day? Have you ever looked at a relationship that felt destined and wondered why it still required so much effort, patience, and humility to survive? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are exploring a question that many people carry quietly for years. How does God plan marriage? Some people want a clear sign. Some people want certainty. Some people fear choosing wrong. We will approach this with reverence and practicality. We will not turn faith into superstition. And we will not turn love into a cold contract. We will translate the question into awakening. Wisdom, karma as cause and effect, compassion with boundaries, practice, and destiny. Because whether you speak in the language of God or the language of psychology, the path of marriage is shaped by character and repeated choices. Let us be honest about why this question is so heavy. Marriage is not a small decision. It touches your heart, your family, your finances, your future, and the way you will grow as a person. So people want certainty. They want a guarantee. They want to know God has approved the choice so they do not have to face the fear of regret. But life rarely gives guarantees. Even in faith, the path often unfolds step by step, not all at once. So the question, how does God plan marriage, can be held into hands at the same time. One hand holds trust that you are guided. The other hand holds responsibility for your choices. If you drop either hand, you suffer. If you drop trust, you become anxious and controlling. If you drop responsibility, you become passive and naive. Wisdom is holding both. Picture a quiet night where you pray for clarity about love. Grace asks, "Is this the person God planned for me?" Maya answers with certainty, but Jonah answers with a softer truth. Maybe the question is not only who, but how. In that moment, humility becomes a compass. Through karma as cause and effect, the idea of divine planning becomes a daily practice of character. Picture a kitchen table where a difficult conversation finally happens. Daniel asks, "Is this the person God planned for me?" Clara answers with certainty, but Nora answers with a softer truth. Maybe the question is not only who, but how. In that moment, honest speech becomes a compass. Through practice as repetition, the idea of divine planning becomes a daily practice of character. If you believe God guides, the guidance often looks like wisdom, not like a lottery ticket. That sentence can change your whole approach. Many people are waiting for a flashing sign, so they do not have to do the slow work of discernment. But discernment is often the sign. The ability to see clearly, to listen for integrity, to watch patterns over time, to notice the fruit a relationship produces inside you. That is guidance in action. Grace grew up hearing two different messages about marriage. One message said God has one perfect person for you and you must find them. The other message said marriage is a covenant that you must honor no matter what. Those messages made her both romantic and terrified. Romantic because she wanted destiny. Terrified because she feared choosing wrong and being trapped. She wanted God to plan it so thoroughly that she could never make a mistake. Then Grace met Daniel. Their first conversations felt easy. Daniel was kind, steady, and thoughtful. Grace felt calm around him. That calmness felt like a sign. But another voice in her mind said calmness is boring. Maybe you need fireworks. This is where discernment begins. Discernment is separating peace from dullness, and separating intensity from intimacy. Some people confuse anxiety with passion. They confuse unpredictability with excitement. They confuse emotional turbulence with spiritual destiny. Wisdom is learning the difference. Grace prayed for a sign. She expected a dramatic confirmation. What she received was quieter. Every time she spent time with Daniel, she felt more honest. She did not need to perform. She did not need to manipulate. She could say, "I am afraid," and he did not punish her. If you are looking for how God plans marriage, consider this. Guidance often looks like the fruit of wisdom inside you. If the relationship produces patience, kindness, self-control, and integrity. That is a kind of sign. But Grace also learned something important. A calm relationship can still hide problems. So she did not confuse comfort with calling. She watched behavior over time. Did Daniel keep promises? Did he repair after conflict? Did he treat people with respect when nobody could reward him? Faith becomes practical here. Godly marriage is not only romance. It is character and consistency. Now let us translate this into karma as cause and effect. In marriage, karma is the atmosphere you create. If you repeat criticism, you build a home full of tension. If you repeat gratitude, you build a home with warmth. If you repeat avoidance, problems grow underground. If you repeat honest speech, problems come into the light where they can be healed. So divine planning is not only about who you choose. It is also about what you repeat after the wedding. Some people want God to plan marriage like a fixed script. But many spiritual traditions also teach that humans have agency. You can call it free will. You can call it responsibility. You can call it stewardship. Either way, your daily choices matter. If you marry a good person and then practice contempt, you will still suffer. If you marry an imperfect person and both of you practice humility and repair, you can grow into a relationship that feels blessed. A year into dating, Grace and Daniel faced a hard season. Daniel lost a job opportunity. Grace felt anxious about the future. Their arguments were not about money alone. They were about fear. Grace wanted to control the plan. Daniel wanted to withdraw and be quiet. In that season, Grace realized something. Marriage does not remove your shadow. Marriage reveals it. Shadow work in a faith context can sound scary, but it is simply honesty. The shadow is the part of you that reacts from fear. Grace's shadow was control. When she felt unsafe, she tightened her grip. She called it responsibility, but it was fear. Daniel's shadow was avoidance. When he felt ashamed, he went silent. He called it peace, but it was hiding. Awakening is naming the shadow without shame. Wisdom is changing the practice. Prayer without practice becomes wishing. Practice without prayer can become pride. The path needs both humility and effort. Grace learned to pray not only for outcomes, but for character. She started praying for the ability to speak truth without cruelty. She started praying for patience when her nervous system wanted to panic. Daniel started praying for courage to stay present when shame told him to disappear. These prayers were not magic spells. They were alignments. They turned their hearts toward practice. They went to counseling. The counselor did not give them magic words. The counselor gave them a practice. When Grace felt anxious, she would speak it without attacking. When Daniel felt shame, he would stay present instead of disappearing. They practiced repair. They practiced apology. They practiced listening. This is where you see the difference between fantasy and covenant. Covenant is built through repair, and repair is deeply spiritual. Repair requires humility. Humility is not humiliation. Humility is accurate self-awareness. It is the ability to say I was wrong without collapsing into shame. It is the ability to say I hurt you without turning it into excuses. It is the ability to change your behavior, not only your words. In many marriages, the lack of repair is the real poison. People fight, then pretend nothing happened. Then the resentment stacks. Resentment is karma. It is the consequence of repeated avoidance. This is also where compassion with boundaries matters. Faith does not ask you to tolerate cruelty. Love is patient, but love is not blind. A healthy marriage requires boundaries. No insults, no manipulation, no secret lies, no repeated betrayal without accountability. If you call everything forgiveness but you never require change, you are not practicing love. You are practicing self-abandonment. Compassion with boundaries is love that refuses to lie. Some people fear boundaries because they think boundaries mean lack of faith. But boundaries can be a form of faith. Faith that truth matters. Faith that love requires integrity. Faith that your soul and your heart are not disposable. Boundaries also protect the other person from becoming worse. When you allow someone to repeatedly harm you without consequences, you train them into deeper selfishness. That is not mercy. That is enabling. Picture a counseling room where patterns are named without shame. Eli asks, "Is this the person God planned for me?" Ravi answers with certainty, but Elena answers with a softer truth. Maybe the question is not only who, but how. In that moment, responsibility becomes a compass. Through awakening its clarity, the idea of divine planning becomes a daily practice of character. Picture a family gathering where old wounds get triggered. Nora asks, "Is this the person God planned for me?" Aiden answers with certainty, but Grace answers with a softer truth. Maybe the question is not only who, but how. In that moment, patience becomes a compass. Through compassion as strength, the idea of divine planning becomes a daily practice of character. Let us talk about destiny. Destiny is not only who you meet. Destiny is who you become after you meet them. That one idea can remove a lot of fear. Because if you think destiny is only a hidden person you must locate, you will live anxious and superstitious. You will interpret every disappointment as failure. You will interpret every strong feeling as fate. But if you understand destiny as the meeting of causes, then you can cooperate with it. You can plant better causes. Karma is cause and effect. In marriage, what you repeat becomes the atmosphere you live inside. Repeat honesty, you build trust. Repeat secrecy, you build paranoia. Repeat gratitude, you build warmth. Repeat contempt, you build coldness. Repeat repair, you build resilience. Repeat avoidance, you build distance. When people ask how God plans marriage, they often want to skip this. But this is where the plan becomes real. Sometimes God closes a door by revealing patterns you can no longer ignore. That can be painful. It can feel like loss, but it can also be protection. Not every relationship that begins with faith ends in marriage. Sometimes the lesson is to learn discernment. Sometimes the lesson is to learn boundaries. Sometimes the lesson is to learn that you cannot love someone into maturity if they refuse accountability. A sign is not always a miracle. Sometimes the sign is that you become calmer and more honest around someone. Sometimes the sign is that conflict becomes repairable. Sometimes the sign is that your life becomes simpler and cleaner, not more chaotic. Sometimes the sign is the opposite. You become anxious. You become smaller. You start lying. You start hiding. You start losing integrity. That is also information. That is guidance too. So how does God plan marriage? One way to hold it is this. God may place people in your path, but you still have to choose with wisdom. And once you choose, growth is invited through practice. Practice forms character. Character forms destiny. The wedding is not the finish line. The wedding is the beginning of the classroom. If you want a practical way to test whether you are on a wise path, listen for these signals in yourself. Do you feel invited into honesty? Do you feel safe enough to tell the truth? Do you feel challenged to grow without being degraded? Do you see consistent integrity in the other person's actions? Do you see willingness to repair? Do you see responsibility? Do you see humility? If those are present, you are not guaranteed a painless life, but you are building on solid ground. If those are absent, it does not automatically mean the person is evil. It means there is work to do, and you need boundaries, counsel, and time. It means you should not rush. Rushing is oft fear disguised as faith. True faith can wait. True faith can do the hard conversation. True faith can face reality. Now let us land the lesson. If you are asking how God plans marriage, do not only look for a dramatic sign. Look for the fruit of wisdom in your life. Pay attention to who makes you more honest, more humble, more steady, and more compassionate. Pay attention to who can repair with you when things get hard. Karma is cause and effect. Whatever you repeat becomes your home. Choose practices that build peace, honest speech, patience, gratitude, and responsibility. If you are already married, the question is not whether you chose perfectly. The question is whether you will practice love with integrity today. That is where destiny changes. I have seen people try to make marriage work by trying harder to be perfect. That usually fails. I have also seen people make marriage work by practicing repair. Repair looks unglamorous. It looks like apologizing. It looks like listening. It looks like changing habits. It looks like setting boundaries. It looks like forgiving without forgetting the lesson. It looks like choosing humility when pride wants to win. That is spiritual practice in action. Thank you for being here. Share your story in the comments in a way that protects privacy. What do you believe God uses to guide people in love? And what practice has strengthened your relationship the most? Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay close. We will keep turning big faith questions into practical wisdom, compassion, and awakening.